Recording has been started.
Good morning, everyone in United States. My name is Dr. Adityanjee, and I am the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. Good evening to our panelists who are joining from India. This is our monthly roundtable discussion organized by the Council for Strategic Affairs. Those of you who registered using our flyer, this is the flyer. And the topic is very important for today's roundtable discussion: China's monopoly on rare earths, geopolitical issues and implications. A little bit about the Council for Strategic Affairs. CSA imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. CSA encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in all its forms and anywhere in the world. CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. We have a monthly roundtable discussion on an important topic on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime in United States and 7:30 p.m. in Indian Standard Time. We have a monthly guest lecture series by a domain expert on the fourth Saturday of each month. CSA also organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. CSA promotes publication of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. And CSA has started a summer internship program for college students. So we will start on our roundtable discussion on China's monopoly on rare earths. We have three distinguished experts, and they include Professor and Dean Srikanth Kondapalli, Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, and Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. I'll give you a brief introduction. This is the picture of our first speaker, Professor and Dean Srikanth Kondapalli. Dr. Kondapalli is Dean of the School of International Studies and Professor in Chinese Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was the chairperson of the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies from 2008 to 2010, 2012 to 2014, and so on and so forth. He is educated in Chinese study in India and China with a PhD in Chinese study. He learned Chinese language at the Beijing Language and Culture Universities. He was a postdoc visiting fellow at People's University, Beijing from 1996 to 1998. He was also a visiting professor at National Chengchi University in Taipei in 2004, a visiting fellow at China Institute of Contemporary International Relations in Beijing in May 2007. He holds honorary professorship at Shandong University, Jinan in 2009, 11, 13, 15, 16, 17, and 19, and a part of and visiting professor at Jilin University in 2014, Yunnan University of Finance and Economics, Kunming University in 2016 and 17, and non-resident senior fellow at People's University since 2014, and a fellow at Salzburg Global Seminar. He has written many books, including on China's military, the PLA transition in 1999, and China's naval power in 2001. He has written multiple monographs. He is very widely published in peer-reviewed articles. He has received K. Subramaniam Award in 2010 for excellence in research in strategic and security studies. He is a guest faculty at Indian Armed Forces units, including the National Defense College, Army War College, College of Air Warfare, College of Naval Warfare, and College of Defense management. He is distinguished fellow at several think tanks, including Vivekananda International Foundation, Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and he has supervised more than 30 PhD students and researchers at JNU, and is also an academic advisor for PhD researchers at various other universities. He is also the editor of JNU School of International Studies, International Studies Journal. I have distinguished pleasure of introducing Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, who is not new to this forum. He has been on this forum before in many different capacities. He has given distinguished lectures as well as participated in roundtable discussions. Commodore Vasan is an alumnus of Defense Service Staff College, the Naval War College, and the International Visitor Leadership Program in United States. He has a distinguished career in Navy spanning over 34 years. His wide-ranging appointments since being commissioned in 1969, both at the sea and ashore, include command of warships, appointment in career-borne wing of INS Vikrant, command of long-range maritime reconnaissance ASW Squadron, member examiner of Air Crew Categorization and Standardization Board. He has been Chief Staff Officer Operational at Southern Naval Command, the premier training command of Indian Navy. He has participated both in 1971 naval operations and also in the IPKF operations. Since his retirement from Navy, he has been writing regularly for various magazines, newspapers, and websites. He has been conducting workshops and delivering talks for international delegates in many parts of the world on maritime issues, military diplomacy, strategy, security, and aviation issues, and China-related strategy and security issues. Everyone knows that Commodore Vasan is currently the director of Chennai Center for China Studies, a premier think tank focusing on Chinese studies. He's also head of strategy and security studies at the Center for Asia Studies. He has also been the regional director for National Maritime Foundation Chennai chapter from October 2016. He was also elected as president of Navy Foundation Chennai chapter in August of 2019. His areas of study have included maritime diplomacy, security and stability in the Indo-Pacific area, India-China relations, international relations, and related issues. He has contributed over 120 articles for magazines, newspapers, edited volumes, and websites. He has been widely invited in various think tanks, TV programs, etc., universities, Chatham House, etc., etc. We are honored to have him. Our third distinguished panelist is Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. She's a freelance writer, blogger, and strategic affairs analyst. She obtained a doctorate in life sciences from Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, which is currently in Telangana. She worked as a research scientist at SenBios. She did a postdoctoral fellowship program at Penn State University from October 2007 to November 2008 on genome-wide nucleosome occupancy in budding yeast. Then she swiftly transitioned from academic research to journalism with a purpose, and she focuses on strategic studies. Over the past 8 years, she has published articles on international relations, geopolitics, climate change, breakthrough science, sports, travelogues, book reviews, and other contemporary issues. She authored a book on foreign policy, a commentary on Modi government's unprecedented outreach and its outcomes. Currently, she is editor-in-chief at My Makers, a US-based web portal. She is I think I've covered all that. and we are again honored to have her back again for the second time in CSA Roundtable discussions. So a little bit about on the topic, China's monopoly on rare earths and geopolitical issues. Rare earths are a series of metals on the periodic table similar to scandium and yttrium that are heavily used in aerospace industry. Having supplies cut off could have a serious negative impact on any country's defense readiness. For example, the high-tech F-35 stealth fighter contains 920 pounds of these elements, so on and so forth. In 2019, China threatened to cut off the flow of these elements used in flat screen panels and other electronic components to US defense contractors. But what is not known that 10 years ago, China actually cut the supply of rare earth metals to Japan, creating problems for Japan's industry as well as armed forces. Chinese Communist Party linked Global Times has noted earlier this month that Chinese government didn't have immediate plans to shut off the flow. However, a source said there could be an export restriction in future, particularly in case of war. So that is where China's intentions are. Little bit of statistics. In year 2020, China controlled 58% of the world production of rare earth elements, whereas US controlled only 16%, Australia 7%, India only 1%. And stung by China, Japan has explored domestic production, so things are changing there as well. And this tells you the rare earth mining fields in Chinese occupied Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, so-called. I am saying so-called because none of the autonomous regions are really autonomous under Chinese occupation. Number of housekeeping rules. Advice to the audience is to keep themselves on mute. Please change your cell phone settings to vibration mode. Please don't try to interrupt our esteemed panelists. During Q&A session, only those members of the audience who identify themselves will be allowed to pose questions. All the questions are to be submitted through the chat function. Please be precise and specific in asking a question. Please don't send lengthy comments in the form of a monologue under the garb of a question. Finally, like any of our program, we will be recording this event, and this should be available within next 24 hours on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I will start inviting our panelists. Our first panelist is Professor and Dean Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli. Each panelist will have 15 minutes of presentation followed by a discussion. So may I have the honor of inviting Professor and Dean Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli. The floor is yours, sir.
Namaskar. Thank you very much, Adityanjee and fellow panelists. A good morning to the audience in United States and our panelists in India. Thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with you on the Chinese system where they have monopolized the rare earth metals. Now, as Dr. Adityanjee has already mentioned, China has monopoly over nearly 44 million tons of rare earth metals. This is quite huge when you compare with the other countries possessing. So that's about 37% roughly of the global rare earth deposits, while India, in comparison, roughly about less than 6% rare earth metal deposits present, and the United States and Japan are estimated to have about roughly 10%, as Dr. Adityanjee has mentioned. Now, prior to the COVID-19, United States imported something like 80% of its rare earth metals from China. And so in normal circumstances, this should not really trouble anyone. This is somebody's buying, somebody's selling. So that should not be a big issue. However, in 2019, the Trump administration implemented the tariff wars. Gradually, this has been escalated into over $250 billion worth of trading items with China. China retaliated, and over 25% of the increase in tariffs were made on ML materials, which used to export something like 50,000 tons of rare earth ores to China so that these can be processed. As you know, China in the last decade, more than a decade, has become the center of manufacturing, center of various minerals being refined. There is also the several American companies have been involved in this. At the moment, there are over 70,000 American companies functioning in China. They have invested about $700 billion. So this is not to include the American companies functioning in the European Union countries, their allies, NATO countries, or other areas of the globe, including Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, or other areas. So these companies have been refining, producing to the global market, and that is where the trouble began. With 25% tariffs on MP materials, this has become a political issue within China, so, and the United States, most important. So that led to the Biden administration carrying forward the legislation related to over $2 trillion in infrastructure development, and part of that included the rare earth metals as well. The issue has become more critical these days because, as Dr. Adityanjee had mentioned, these are useful in critical technologies, and for instance, as he mentioned, in terms of the battery making, the manufacturing, technology manufacturing, missile systems, radars, weapons, satellites, solar panels, wind tunnels, mobile phones, and electric vehicle production, battery making, or renewable energy systems. So with their wide application and the recent focus on climate change, as you know, the Copenhagen summit, prior to that, the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and followed by the meetings in Lima, in Doha, and in Paris in 2015, December, they decided to roll back emissions, and every nation was given a certain target, binding targets, and nationally announced programs have to be made every year. And so that included the climate change related issues, including the current emphasis on EVs, electric vehicle production. In the United States itself, it is estimated that they have a target of some 12 million units to be produced in the next 2 years' time. And so this massive scale of electric vehicle production puts a lot of emphasis on rare earth metal production and processing and so on. Processing is mainly in China at the moment, and because of the tariff wars, this has acquired a domestic problem in the United States as well as a global problem. Global problem because of the supply chain disruptions. And the United States want to secure the supply chain mechanism, restore this at the domestic level, and avoid any losses because of the entry of tariffs that became critical for the whole process. Now, China has these 37% roughly of global deposits. And in fact, in the last 1 decade or so, has become the main supply chain center for all these, not just rare earth metals, by the way, but also the other manufacturing sector. And China itself had introduced the Made in China 2025. By 2025, in the next 2 years, 3 years time, China is planning to procure 80% of its materials from the domestic production of the high-tech products. So in this Made in China 2025 are various technology manufacturing items. So that require a lot of rare earth metals as well. So number one, they restricted or planning to restrict the export of rare earth materials, partly due to the bilateral political issues with the United States, with Japan, with other countries, and with the recent missile strikes on Taiwan, closer to Taiwan, and the targeting of the EEZs in Japan. The signaling is clear. Also, after Australia had raised the issue of the origin of the virus in Wuhan at the WHA, World Health Assembly, which is binding on the WHO investigations. China retaliated by banning several products from Australia. Of course, Australia did not suffer because they diversified most of the trade to other countries. So they wriggled out of the situation. Nevertheless, the threat of rare earth metals, ironically, Australia produces these and processes these in China, like the United States, like other countries. So the issue today is, for Australia at least, and for other countries, is how to secure this supply chain mechanism, which is captured by China by deliberately decreasing the prices, by manipulating the prices in the global market. And so they were able to marginalize many actors. California previously used to have a monopoly. And because of the price structuring, the Californian rare earth metals producing companies have gone bust. And much of this manufacturing, processing, etc., has shifted to China. Likewise, India also used to have a lot of manufacturing, a lot of mining of the rare earth metals. Now, because of the price mechanism, we also tend to import more from China, and Galwan incident and possibly the Indian Ocean region incidents in the future are likely to put pressure on India as well from China. So this is what we generally call as monopoly in simple terms. But as Dr. Adityanjee mentioned, Japan was the first one to face the flak in 2010. So in 2010, one of the owners of the 3 islands in Senkaku, he passed away without leaving that to his inheritors. The Tokyo metropolitan government wanted to nationalize, and it was headed by a highly nationalist person, Ishihara, and assuming that this is going to be more controversial, the national government in Tokyo the Japanese government nationalized the 3 islands in the Senkaku, which is a group of 5 islands. So in 1945, they used to produce azimuth, but basically for fashion designing and other items. Now, China retaliated because at that time there was one of the Chinese ships, a small ship headed by a captain with nearly 14 sailors in that. They wanted to land on the Senkaku Islands, and these were stopped by the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces. Now, as a retaliation to this, the Chinese have banned the rare earth metals. Now, I want to bring in the international relations theory here. Robert Keohane and Joseph Nye famously argued in their treatise on economic interdependence. So they argued that A and B are trading with each other. They're investing in each other. For example, Japan has some 83,000 companies prior to the COVID-19 in China, including Mitsubishi, Toshiba, and you name it. They have those companies in China. They also had some $300 billion of investment in China, and tourism and other aspects also have been quite high in their bilateral relations. For example, Todai, Tokyo University, has the highest number of Chinese students. So Joseph Nye and Robert Keohane argued if A is trading with B, if A is investing in B, if A has tourism with B, and vice versa, then chances of political conflict between A and B are quite minimal, because the political leaderships in A and B, they tend to see the benefits of economic interdependence, and they try to reduce the conflict. However, 2010 onwards, the ban of rare earth metals to Japan indicated to an asymmetric interdependence rather than a straightforward interdependence between the two. So the rare earth metals banned by China due to its monopoly in all these created conditions for the asymmetric interdependence. So this is a new element in the theoretical discussion in international relations. They did not foresee, well, actually they did, in terms of suggesting that there could be a few conditions that characterize A and B integration among themselves. So they suggested 4 conditions for integrative potential: symmetry or economic equality of units, that is trade, integration, and level of development, and so on. As you know, in East Asia, they have reached a level of integration. So much so they are now talking about free trade areas, RCEP, and others. Second is the elite value complementarity, meaning there is an elite consensus for developing relations with each other, for sustainable integration, and so on. Third is that they insisted the existence of pluralism in terms of the diverse group of enhancing integration, unlike in many countries in the developing world where you see that pluralism is missing. And finally, the capacity of these member states to adapt and respond, especially with the domestic stability and very quick decision-making process. So based on that, the Keohane and Nye assumed that Japan and China, if we take this example of the rare earth metals, they would be reducing the conflict on this issue. However, for the integration to happen, there is also the politicization, redistribution of alternatives, and externalization. That is the common position of member states in dealing with non-member states. So all this put together, there is the issue that China and Japan faced of abrupt decline or even shutdown in the rare earth metals. Of course, it's an opportunity for India. Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was the Prime Minister at the time, and Shinzo Abe, they concluded the joint statement whereby the Indians would start exploring opportunities for rare earth metals exports to Japan. So it had a side effect positively for India on that count. So in the background of this, we can also see a few other case studies, such as the terminal high altitude air defense system deployment by South Korea in south of its country. And in this process, the Chinese weaponized not just trade, but also tourism by reducing the number of tourists who are going to Jeju Islands. And also they targeted Lotte Group for active protests by the Chinese, organized protests. And so the South Korea then started moving away to Southeast Asia and other countries because of the THAAD deployment and Chinese punishment on South Korea. Similar thing happened also with Taiwan. When Dr. Tsai Ing-wen was elected as the president, the Chinese imposed various restrictions, including in the business as well as tourism and so on. So Chinese monopoly on rare earth metals had an effect of weaponizing integration, trade, investments, and other sectors, which as part of globalization, these have become very crucial. In fact, very important. Although President Xi Jinping said that he wants to be the leader of globalization, nevertheless, when it came to the rules of integration, as I just mentioned, there is a problem of implementation of all these. So, in other words, the recent tariff wars between US and China and the conflict, as we saw in the Taiwan Straits, all these have triggered a huge debate on securing domestic supply chain mechanisms related to the rare earth metals. Now, I also want to say here that the Quad had met 4 times, 2 virtually and 2 in person. They have mentioned about 3 things constantly. One is, of course, vaccine production, distribution, and third on maritime. But the second one, which is of relevance for us, is critical technologies. And this is where the R&D in rare earth metals and their production, distribution, processing, and so on and so forth will be part of the design in the Quad countries, although nothing really has happened so far. So this is a project that we probably will see in future, depending, of course, on the market trends on the rare earth metals and others. Although it is focusing mainly on quantum computing and other critical technologies, this is also one area where the Quad countries possibly would be interested and possibly addressing this issue in the future. So let me stop by saying that the Chinese monopoly on rare earth metals has created a unique opportunity for China to punish many countries, weaponize the rare earth metals supplies, and reap benefits, although these are in short term only. Since the industry, manufacturing, etc., is heavily dependent on rare earth metals, so this is an area which no country wants to ignore, and that is where the topic today is of significance. Let me thank the organizers for inviting me for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor and Dean Dr. Kondapalli. It was a delight to hear from an academician about this particular talk, highly educative, and I'm pretty sure our audience benefited from this presentation. Moving from academia I'm going to invite the military men now, Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, who is also the director of Chennai Center for China Studies and has been a frequent visitor and guest and speaker on this forum. So, Commodore Vasan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. Always a great pleasure to be part of your discussions because they are of high quality. You always made it a point to ensure that all the related issues and those which are so current and topical are discussed in these forums. So I'm very happy to be part of these initiatives. I know a lot of academicians and researchers look forward to the kind of discussions that are here. My problem today is that to speak after Professor Kondapalli because there is nothing much is left for others to say at all. So, let me try and flag some of the issues that are of relevance to us in the process of the self-discovery as far as India is concerned. In the year of 75th anniversary, that reminds me that let me also extend my warm greetings to all of you on the eve of 75th anniversary, where Atmanirbharata has become a focus. So some of the discussions that we are going to hold today will also be of great relevance to our quest for Atmanirbharata. My own sort of familiarization with these periodic tables was 5 decades ago. As part of a chemistry student in my graduation, I used to look at all the 17 elements. It only had some value for me to get some marks. If I remember the atomic number and their position in the periodic table, and that's what I did. And I started realizing that 5 decades thereafter, we'd be looking at this in such a serious manner as we are doing today. That also reminds me about another factor. Dr. Adityanjee, while reading out my brief bio, mentioned about my engagement with INS Vikrant, the very first carrier, where I was part of the embarked squadrons. I used to be part of this embarked squadron from 70 to 74, and I'm very happy to inform this August audience that on 1st of September, this first indigenous aircraft carrier, which will be displacing 44,000 tons, will be commissioned in Kochi. And since I served on board, I've been invited to be part of their initiative, which Prime Minister will be launching the ship and dedicating it to it in the year of Swarnavamshi. So that's a great opportunity for me. Why I am bringing that issue is Vikrant, which should be launched on 1st of September, and which has already completed 4 sea trials, would not have been able to do anything if it had not met the requirements of various semiconductors and critical technologies for its weapon sensors, propulsion, its machinery control room, for its aircraft. The new aircraft that are going to come with the MS-60 Romeos, whether it is the Rafale or the F-18s or the MiG-29s which are going to fly from there. Now, all these aircraft cannot function without the support of the RRE. Statistics are very clear to tell you whether it is the F-35 or the Rafale or the Mirage or the Arleigh class of destroyers or the nuclear submarines. They carry substantial amount of rare earth items on board. Whether it is for their displays, whether it is for their weapon control, whether it's for their magnetrons, whether it's there for torpedoes. So there is no escape. So I'm talking about this as a military man, but the point is that even every day, the very flat screen that is in front of me, a laptop, has so much of components without which it will just break down. So which is where I think China has been ahead of all of us. It's very clear that they planned better. It's not that they have the largest deposits of rare earths with them, but the processing factories, the infrastructure that they built was to monopolize on this, and so that they can use it as a weapon of the future. So it was granted to the Chinese for the way in which they expand their strategic thought to ensure that all this, which perhaps were ignored by others, are taken up. They also had another advantage, which is important to understand, that they did not have to worry about environmental degradation. They did not have to worry about labor loss. So the complete community out there was exploited. No, let's face it. If you had to do the same thing, let's say in India, there is no way you could have been able to do it without protests. The copper magnates in Thoothukudi, you've seen nuclear protests which were there. So, it was easy for a communist China, which was trying to move away from its agricultural agrarian society into an industrial hub of the world. And in the process, they captured the markets. But in fact, America was ahead of China, which is the facts have been brought out by both Dr. Adityanjee as well as Professor Kondapalli. And the fact is that the fact that it could be made cheaper, the processing plants were set up in China in different parts, and they were still importing, various raw materials for RRE. It's just the processing and the finished product that they were able to push out to the global markets, and ensured that there was greater dependency. So the dependency factor was phenomenal. So going back to the point that Professor Kondapalli mentioned of 2010 incident, where the Chinese fishermen were taken into custody by the Japanese Coast Guard, immediately they imposed sanctions on the export of solid materials. And Japanese, they're known for they're the leaders in electronic manufacturing, whether it's washing machines, whether it is TVs, whether it is warships, whether it is missiles, or their defense systems. So they suddenly found that they were being stifled. Somebody was holding them by the throat. But did it work? No. Yes, it was immediately in the immediate period. It was difficult for China to impose these restrictions. They did that, but a country that was exporting something like 98%, suddenly you found it came down to 68%. So it backfired in this case when China used to weaponize the supply of rare earth end products to Japan, because Japan did it to Australia. They set up joint factories. And Professor Kondapalli also mentioned about India, where we also are working closely with Japan, not only from the time of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, but also in the Narendra Modi, particularly with the closed chemistry that existed between Namo and the late Abe. They initiated a lot of projects. 2011, 11 to 2012 are notable for the initiatives in India. Unfortunately, because of the fact that we are a democracy, we still look at EIA, the environmental impact analysis. A lot of this did not deliver as expected, which is why we are somewhere fourth, fifth, whatever, but we have a long way to go. In this context, I must also bring out that when Trump there, he really went after China. In fact, I think he even made an offer to buy out complete Greenland, knowing the kind of reserves that were there. And thereafter, it just did not happen. But they realized the importance of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden and others, which have phenomenal amount of reserve. Just that it's almost like outsourcing the production processes to a country that was willing to absorb the environmental impact. No, see, just 3 days ago, we had a lecture by an eminent scholar from Singapore on food security of China. In the process, what we realized was that today, the groundwater of China, 80% of it is polluted, is unfit for agrarian use. Likewise, 50% of their potable water is affected. Why? Because they went into these kind of environmentally degrading practices with scant regard for it. Now, whether they were mining, whether they were processing, the fact what came out is clearly that they were unable to control the environmental disasters that took place. And therefore, perhaps in hindsight, we need to be even more cautious on the environmental dimensions of, trying to just compete with China. What are the costs that we have to pay? This is something that we need to remember. So from the Indian point of view, though apparently we are ahead of China in the 50s, we even established the IREL, Rare Earth Limited, but how PSUs function in India. And apparently after a decade or so, they realized the importance of this and they brought it under the Department of Atomic Energy Commission, DAC. But yes, they are struggling and, they're trying to do something. And so when you look at the figures, it is really surprising that, these of the initiatives are not yielded any result. It's something that is, we need to take, it's a stock taking and auditing that is required to see where we have gone wrong in, our new thrust for Atmanirbhar Bharat. The Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign was always there. It's nothing new. But the point is, what has been the success rate? So I need to be a little more critical, at least in the 75th year of our independence, to see why we have succeeded in some areas and we have not been able to succeed in some areas. It's important, extremely important. Now, there's also a talk of, remember, after the war, 71 war, and thereafter, even after Kargil, we realized that the world is also looking at what's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR. And today, we are looking at whether there is a need for us to have a strategic REE reserve. That is what can keep your country going. Because some of this criticality of the components which are there is something that you cannot just replace. There are new technologies coming to replace semiconductors and the kind of things that go into your everyday products, domestic products, your military products, your strategic technology, whether it's communications, whether it's 5G, whether it's 6G, 7G, whatever. So there's a phenomenal amount of need today to look at and refine our targets of how we want to achieve self-reliance. And this you can't do it on alone. Yeah, I was very happy to see a report today, which said that some of the Indian scientists have succeeded in getting some uranium from seawater. That this was a report that's just yesterday today. So, the answer is to try and look at new technologies and not just replace it with the older technologies. So if there is some new barrier that can be breached, and that should be objective of the various projects. So Professor Kondapalli also mentioned that the quad. I would look at, we discussed quad some time ago in this forum. I look at it as something a very positive development. More so because it's not looking at a military alliance. It's not a Asian NATO that is taking on China, but it is providing those options for all the four partners to see how they can optimize, together on areas of technology, vaccine diplomacy, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. These are the areas which will lead us to a leadership position. You can't do it on yourself. Though, when you look at the broad-based structure of Indian academicians, technocrats, etc., we are very well placed. But how do you translate this into an output that the nation demands? So that is where I think we require innovative thinking, innovative technologies, cooperation and coordination with others. And unless all this is put together as a national policy, which can take deep roots in the conscience of the nation, we will not make much progress. So I just had, I think, one or two more points before wind up. I must give time for others also. No, I again agree with Dr. Kondapalli when the 2019 COVID, when it happened, I would again look at this as an opportunity. Every crisis as an opportunity is a new slogan that everyone adopts, but we must swear by that. It's something of a great opportunity that told us how reliant we are on the supply chains that were established by China. So the RSCI, or the Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, which is also part of the Quad and the IPEF, these are the future initiatives of democracies, the free liberal world. So, we should not lose sight of the fact that unless we can, join hands with like-minded democracies, who have similar kind of concerns about China's aggressive intent, we will not succeed. So there are a lot of positives that are happening in the last, 8-10 years, because we are not just saying something; we are walking the talk, as you say. When you are talking about look east, we are saying let's act east. It's not just looking east. Stop looking, start acting. So this is where I see a lot of utility in the discussions, where we are required to understand what the challenges are, particularly from China, which has virtually mastered the entire gamut of supply chain initiatives. It has made the rest of the world dependent on by sacrificing even its own some of the interests and the liberties of their own people, subjecting them to labor stresses, and the results are showing to me. It's not that everything is hunky-dory in China. So it is not that we are only looking at China to sort of contain it, or let's look at what is our trajectory and what are the things that are required for Indian trajectory to succeed. If it means that we must join hands with Japan, Australia, Southeast Asian countries, or Middle East for some other energy security, or Russia for gas supply, let's do it. So, I think what is very clear in the policymakers' mind today is that we work to serve our national interests. We're not interested in, something else. It is our national interest. And therefore, the strategic autonomy, which we discussed also some time ago, is all about aligning with our interests. Aligning with your interests and not with A or B or C. If B serves the purpose, we align with B. If A gives me a better option, I align with A. So, of course, there's nothing is independent of geopolitics and geostrategy. But, within this ambit of the challenging decades which are ahead of us, we need to work to a plan. It is not just about the RRE, REE, but it's also about other sectors. Your energy, your space, your nuclear capacity, your maritime dimensions, your blue economy, everything comes in together. So, luckily, just 3 days ago or 4 days ago, there was a conference where looking at if India is taking the leadership position in G20 now, in December, we are likely to take over the presidency. What is it that we can do? Let's lay down the agenda for the G20 countries. And part of this would also be to ensure that there are always ultra.
So we lost your sound connection. We lost your sound connection.
In our this is an opportunity of great relevance in this decade. Let's capitalize in this opportunity and move forward. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much indeed, Commodore Vasan, for a very inspiring, talk and presentation about what India can do to come out of this complex situation. I'm really glad that you were able to squeeze some time. I know you had another presentation before that, but we are delighted to hear from you. Now we go on to our last panelist. I am going to make a statement. There was a time when people said international relations are not for women, that's a man's job. So we have an amateur international relations expert, a young and upcoming expert, Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. She has been writing very extensively and is editor-in-chief of myin.net. So, Dr. Pusarla, the floor is yours now. Your sound is not there, Dr. Pusarla. Kindly unmute yourself. You are muted.
Okay, is it audible, sir, now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Oh, namaste, everybody, and namaste, my fellow panelists. It's an honor and a delight for me to join these esteemed and distinguished panel members. And thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, for once again giving me this opportunity to be part of this expert panel. So, without much ado, I just want to pick up strands from what Professor Kondapalli has left, and then Dr. Adityanjee in his initial introduction have mentioned. So, drawing from both of them, and these are few insights and other side of the coin which I want to present. So these are my observations as of now. The world or the countries are right now are grappling through crisis after crisis, and then nothing could have been a big jolt than the fact that nations are realizing that they are being reliant on some other countries, sometimes completely. Just as Russia's invasion on Ukraine has exposed the helplessness of EU in terms of supply-related issues pertaining to crude oil, natural gas, and coal. As rightly mentioned, in 2010, Japan has similarly faced such kind of an issue. At a time when Japan was really importing roughly 85% of its rare earth elements from China, it has to face the wrath of China. But China, given its record, it wasn't the first instance that where world has seen that phase of China, because even earlier, Norway had to face a similar situation, and right now, just recently, Lithuania had to undergo a similar kind of a situation. So this track record of China of using some of its assets as political weapons is not really new. And then this has set a kind of a precedent for the world and other countries, how they have to gear up with such a kind of a situation when China has nearly monopolized the entire business, all the aspects related to rare earth, rare earth elements. So rare earth elements, as like Commodore has rightly pointed, like when takes us back to the periodic table. But right now, like rare earths together, countries have realizing the difficulties in overcoming these monopolies exercised by certain countries. Countries have now laid out certain kind of strategies, and then they have identified what are called as critical minerals or critical raw materials. US has defined them as critical minerals, which comprise of 35 elements, which includes, of course, the 17 rare earths, but also the other elements which are part of what are called as the platinum group of elements. And these all, additionally, it also includes some of the elements like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which are now really of a great use in terms of like green transition, or like which are really very essential for realizing the climate change goals set by each of these nations. So what has happened is like China with its like by exercise its monopoly has like awakened nations like what they have to do in future. Like just immediately after China has imposed those restrictions, America has like brought out a strategic paper in 2020, in 2010, sorry. So that was like under the presidency of Obama, when they have like introduced the first or issued the first critical material strategy document. But like after that in 2012, again, US, Japan, and EU has taken this issue to WTO for arbitration, and then the dispute arbitration panel has ruled in favor of US. But the matter didn't end there. After that, like Japan has slowly worked out various measures as how it can reduce its dependency from China regarding rare earths. As Commodore has pointed out, Japan has collaborated with Australia, and then has identified certain areas where it can collaborate and then can maintain its reliance. As statistics point out, like from importing nearly 92%, the Japan has successfully reduced its dependency on China to at least like 58% by 2018. Not only this, as several other nations like EU in 2012 has established like European Initiative Partnership on Rare Raw Materials to carry out the raw materials initiative. But and then like even Australia has been like Australia's major industry has shifted its processing unit to Indonesia, and it has been in a small ways have been trying to explore where it can reposition itself, like as it was already pointed, like rare earth elements extraction, processing, and refining is involved with a lot of environmental issues as well. So nations faced different kinds of hurdles to have that kind of an entire kind of a processing unit in one country. Now coming back to China, I just want to say that like China has really excelled in all the three steps of like rare earths, that is like upstream, downstream, and middle stream processes of rare earth. That is to say, like right from exploration, mining, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and then processing, it has evolved. It has developed expertise, owing to which it has now become a it has developed a state of art in kind of like rare earths, where it is already like some analysts point out that this is what is called as reverse colonization. As in case of colonization, as we have seen, like West used to import raw materials from the developed countries and then have to use to export the fine products. China, in the reverse way, started getting all the raw materials from the developed countries or other places where they were present in abundance, and started delivering the finely processed goods. So in the process, it has become like indispensable for the rest of the world. So to overcome this, like as rightly pointed by Professor Kondapalli, Trump has been one of the Trump administration has taken it very seriously, and has even announced a national emergency. He has signed a law. He has signed into law National Defense Authorization Act that has prevented US from buying permanent magnets, tungsten, molybdenum, and tantalum products from China. And also, like, he was the one who has passed a presidential order in December 2017, and later on by February 2018, he has revealed all the plans as how America can boost the production of 35 critical minerals, which were identified by Department of Interior. And then subsequently in June 2019, at the height of US-China trade war, Department of Commerce has presented what was called as 6 calls to action, 24 goals, and 61 recommendations. And following it up, US has also started an initiative with 9 other countries for Energy Resource Governance Initiative. And interestingly, as US is always believed to ally with its like-minded partners, in this ERGI initiative started by Trump, US has included countries like Australia, Botswana, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, Democratic Republic of Congo, Namibia, Philippines, and Zambia. So wherein they have had an understanding that US would share mining expertise with these countries to develop highly processing of lithium, cobalt, and nickel. So this was one of the silent initiatives which US has taken up. While nothing much has progressed after the Trump administration, Trump's focus with regards to rare earths has always been he was emphasizing it in terms of economic security, and economic security for Trump has translated directly into national security. So he always viewed rare earths as something which is very essential for the national security of US. And when it transitioned to when the reins were taken over by Biden, his emphasis or his focus on rare earths has been about climate mitigation. So, while there has been a continuity, there are now questions about how world can counter the monopoly of China, because it's not about rare earths, because this phenomena of China, because China has been always using um, um, these resources, or it has been at the forefront of a new era where it has driven wars and conflicts which are basically about resources. So it has it has brought the world to a situation where the inevitability of geopolitical rivalries and tensions have become even more apparent, because given the kind of fragile situation that the world is going through in terms of the kind of binaries in that we are seeing, there is likely that the world would be pushed into another kind of a confrontation. So to mitigate this, China, US has recently initiated another um, um, another another program that is called as the Mineral Security Partnership, wherein it has like Enlist has now called that are now referring to this Mineral Security Partnership as metallic NATO, because it has invited all like-minded partners and also partners who are ideologically aligned to it. And the list of this MSP included like Australia, um, the UA, the EU, the UK, Sweden, Germany, France, and it has like literally included all the countries which were part of NATO, and has like created has like planned for a collaboration what was called as friendly shoring, wherein US would like collaborate and foster investments in these countries that would help, that would be like kind of a mutually beneficial thing, wherein like MSP partners will be collaborating in like having a resilient supply chain. They'll be securing the supply chain and ensure that this stability is maintained, so that none of these countries, which are now like really having a kind of a rift with China, wouldn't suffer because of China's policies. So this is like where while this is where like the world is right now encountering, that is like the monopoly over one of the resources is triggering a kind of a geopolitical contestation and confrontation. And then it is faced with a situation wherein like the countries are like prompted to evolve alternative measures or initiatives wherein they can counter China. But herein lies the problem, because like unlike China, which has been really uh, committed to have this as like committed to use this strategic issue as a political weapon, countries, all other countries like US, EU, Japan, and others are like treating it as something which is going to affect their industrial competitiveness. And also there is another thing like by restricting the collaboration with like-minded countries, US has eliminated the countries like which have rich deposits of these minerals, essential critical minerals, that is like even lithium, cobalt, and Indonesia. By this, like it has, it is like developing into a group, because it's like now it has become a group. The world is now encountering two groups, wherein like the one which is headed by US, which is, and then the other which is like led by China. China, through its BRA, RCEP, and other initiatives, it has like maintained kind of a good relations with all other countries, including the countries which are like politically unstable, which US fear to even collaborate, like countries like Democratic Republic of Congo and other countries which include Madagascar, Afghanistan. US is investing heavily in these countries, right from mining and all other aspects. So it is like it has become this resource has become a future point of contestation. So now while it might be unfair to say that it might be it might trigger any kind of a confrontation, but given the track record of China, this scenario might be possible, and likely the world might face this kind of a situation. During COVID, countries have faced this kind of has had to confront this kind of a situation of fragility of global supply chain, fragility in the global supply chains. In now that kind of a thing is going to, that kind of a scenario is going to extend because of this ongoing Taiwan situation, and then the kind of a clamor for having a kind of a dominance. So this is going to be a crucial thing ahead for the nations.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Pusarla, for very enlightening comments and keeping us up to date to what is happening in international relations and geopolitics at this point in time. And we will come back to it. We have some time for question and answers, and there is in chat function one question. But before I go on to that particular question, I'm going to point out certain things. All our three distinguished panelists talked about how China monopolized the refining and processing of rare earths and critical metal minerals over a period of last 2 or 3 decades. So it's not a sudden process. It has happened over a period of time. What we have really not discussed, there was just one oblique tangential mention to what happened in Tuticorin by Commodore Vasan. Use of sabotage in rival countries, and I'll give you a few examples. There is some suggestion that the protests against the Tuticorin copper plant were motivated, politically motivated and supported externally. Second example is the Foxconn plant in Bengaluru. Leftist unions carried an agitation to, sabotage that, advanced chip manufacturing plant in India. Third thing is an example of fire, unexplained fire, in Serum Institute of India campus in Pune. Again, there was suspicion of sabotage. So there are examples of after examples that besides monopolizing the supply chains, the refining processes and all that sort of thing, China is utilizing its money power to sabotage peer competitors. And any of our distinguished panelists may comment on this particular issue.
Thank you, Adityanjee. I am happy that you brought out this issue of Sterling Company. Before this tamasha that went on, I know we were not importing copper to the extent that they're importing now. So obviously, the subversion that you talk about has happened in a very effective manner. Whether it is through the left lobby, whether it is through some of these ideologically driven groups. The point is that we've seen that. The impact is that, from being exporters or at least being self-sufficient in copper production because of sterling, today we are importing it. So, obviously, so these are the dynamics that are at play. There is phenomenal amount of studies that have been undertaken on Chinese influence operations, by the Law Society Association in Delhi, and also by a Western professor who we had invited recently for a talk. So that clearly brings out the dimensions of how, the free press, the media, the democratic process in India and other democratic countries are used to its advantage. I know even during the height of Galwan, Professor Kondapalli will also watch for it. The ambassador here was writing everything in Hindu, and he also advised his consul general in Mumbai to keep writing for Indian Express and others, singing the Chinese story, the Chinese narrative. So, obviously, what we have to be critically aware of is that in democracy, there is scope for dissent. There, the free media is there, but these are the same things that are used as assets by China. Can we do the same thing in China? There's no way. So I have to be conscious of this, whether it is the Kondapalli protest, which was apparently driven by the West, that has a different dimensions. I'm not going to discuss this, but the point is there are vested interests who would like to see that India does not succeed in its journey. It is becoming even more important to now to be conscious of these designs by external powers, including China, to put India down. That is something that we need to be conscious of. So it's not just Sterling factories. It is not just the Kudamkulam or anything else that is happening, but it is a design. And we better be aware and be proactive to see that incidents such as which happened in Foxconn do not happen again if we are to progress.
Professor Kondapalli, do you have any comments on this issue?
I just agree with Commodore Vasan and pass it on for any questions that may arise.
Okay. There's a question from the chat function by Abhinav Banka, and it is basically bringing G20 into energy security partnership for minerals and rare earth, how India can leverage its position in G20 to bring it into the agenda in near term.
So if I may, just on 3rd to 5th, the Observer Research Foundation in Delhi had conducted a 1.5-day conference on India at 75. And part of this was also about the multilateralism that was there. And since the question is very specific to G20, what is India trying to do is that, after all, this is now, it's being passed down from Indonesia to us, and then next will be Brazil. So, all of these developing countries at some level or the other. So there is certain amount of cohesive approach to laying down the agenda. So, since I was there, I know that Mr. Abhinav Kanta, who was with Niti Aayog, has been designated as the Sherpa, G20 Sherpa. And there is a talk of having something like 200 town hall meetings around India, before December, to see what kind of approach there should be. So I'm sure that energy security will be uppermost, particularly after the Ukraine crisis, and also the food security. China is having a serious issue on food security. So all this will definitely come under the umbrella of G20 discussions, I have no doubts. So they are very proactive, and I was very happy to see a kind of approach that was adopted by Indian government, as it is, ready to take over the leadership of the G20 as a president, and it gives us a phenomenal opportunity to work through the maze of international relations to see that we derive maximum benefit, but also take some more people along with us, the developing countries. So I'm sure Professor Kondapalli will have something to add on this. Over to you, Professor.
Any of the other panelists on this question?
Well, the G20 has been instituted for the macroeconomic, global economic related matters. It has been in circulation for a long time, and but this issue has, with the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, there has been historically, if you look at the energy prices, for example, they hover around $60 to $70 per barrel. But during the global financial crisis, 2007-8, we have seen that going up to $140 per barrel. And then during COVID, it is almost zero because of the problems in transportation and social distancing and other issues in 2020 and 2021. So the fluctuations now, it has already crossed $100 billion with the $100 per barrel with the conflict in Ukraine. So these fluctuations are not good for the trading countries or those countries which are importing a lot of energy resources, because it is going to pinch on the GDP calculations as well as the economic activity itself. So, so far, the energy issue has not come up as a major issue in G20 process. But with such fluctuations, it is quite possible that G20 may consider. I'm a little bit skeptic whether the G20 could consider this, because traditionally they looked at FDI, they looked at trade, they looked at macroeconomic situation, and the energy has its own cartels, the West Asia, Middle East, Russia, and other places. So it is very unlikely to be put up at the G20 as a major item of discussion.
I have a comment, and Dr. Pusarla had mentioned about, the two groupings, one China-led, one US-led. Unfortunately, we need to ponder over what is India's situation and what are India's options. I may clarify that India is not part of the Strategic Mineral Initiative as expounded by United States. So, yes, there's a bipolarity over there, but from Indian perspective, what are we planning to do? Because China is not going to help you. China is an adversary. Let's be very frank about it. And for whatever reason, United States has deemed it not fit to invite India into this mineral security initiative.
Strategic partnership.
Although at the time of Quad, it was said that India will be a major partner. Dr. Pusarla, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, it has been a cause of concern, and then some of the people have even recommended Ministry of Finance and also MEA to take up this issue with the US, because given the kind of strategic the kind of a strategic partnership which we enjoy with US on so many other issues, there can be no reason why India should be excluded from this initiative like MSP. Another thing, what India has been doing quietly is like after having this for FTA with Australia, it has also has given major push to rare earth production and processing in collaboration with Australia. Australia, like in addition to rare earth deposits, which are like lesser than India, has made an extensive progress because it has like always pushed for mining and extraction of these minerals, and then had alternative sources of processing and have set up alternative processing units in different countries. But India has started really late. And then in 2020 and 2021, in its discussions with Australia, it has made a point that rare earth is going to be one of the major points of cooperation. So this is one of the major steps that India is going to take. And another thing which people really like say that India would more or less would have a lead or like wouldn't suffer much, because like they say that like India has like 35% of what they call as beach sand elements, like which contain all these critical elements. So this is also one of the things which India has in its possession, and it isn't deprived of minerals or as such, but it needs to tie up or have to finance research in terms of like what Japan is doing, that is like recycling, and then promoting research in finding substitutes for these kind of rare earth elements. So India can alternatively do these two things, and additionally it can collaborate with other countries like even African countries. South Africa has got rich deposits, and then South American countries like Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia are known to have high amounts of lithium deposits. So this is the one way. This is another alternative which India can adapt and then pursue. Recycling is another thing which India can do, and recover from already like existing rare earth oxides. Rare earth oxides are also like are found to be potential sources for having this pure rare earth elements. So these are the available options before India, I feel.
Thank you, Dr. Pusarla. Any other panelists would like to say anything before we conclude? We are almost over the time. It was very educative and enlightening discussion with different points of view from different panelists with their distinguished backgrounds. We were very enlightened by Professor Kondapalli on the theory of complex interdependence as propounded by Robert Keohane and Joseph Nye. As far as we are dealing with China, since 1947 onwards, not just on rare earth, as well as on United States, especially to our China watchers, I am going to end with a quote, and that quote is from Sanskrit. It says, "Na vishwaset avishwaste, na vishwaset avishwaste, vishwaste api na vishwase, vishwasat bhayam utpannam, mulanyapi nikrantati." So the one you do not trust, of course you're not going to trust, but the one you trust, don't ever trust that person either, because the one who is your trustworthy is going to dig your roots. And we have seen that trusting too much China, whether it is theory of complex interdependence vis-a-vis Japan or vis-a-vis India, has not worked for India. So my request to China watchers is, don't take China's word for its face value. It doesn't mean a thing. We'll have to strategize from India's perspective what we need to do about strategic mineral reserve initiative. I think the governments that are there at this point in time and governments that are come to rule India in future will have to take a very serious view. Instead of relying on whether Western-led initiative or China-led, a kind of monopoly, India will have to find her own ways in getting strategic, reserve for minerals and rare earths. In this context, one may see that yes, democracy is an impediment, but India needs to devise mechanisms like in US Defense Production Act, which can be invoked in a situation of emergency in which the courts of the land do not have any locus standi. So yes, you can have democracy and you can have special purpose legal vehicles that give you authority to deal with sabotage and things like that. So there are ways of dealing with this situation, and I think our strategic thinkers, our policy planners will give this some serious thoughts. I'm highly thankful to our distinguished panelists who took their precious time off on a weekend to participate in this discussion. I'm also thankful to our audience. And lastly, I'm thankful to Team CSA, especially Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, who has been doing back-end work to make a success. Thank you very much indeed, and namaskar. And we shall be back in 2 weeks' time on a distinguished lecture from Ambassador and Professor Veena Sikri on India's alliance with ASEAN. What is the future? So that distinguished lecture is going to be held on Saturday, August 27th, 10 a.m. US time, 7:30 p.m. India time. So we shall be back at your command and service. And with that, thank you everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Jai Hind.